A school bus left on a foggy morning with 53 students and 3 teachers on board and vanished without a trace. No accident, no ransom, no leads, just gone. For years later, a mother opened her school principal's email, and what she found changed everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. For years ago, the morning fog hung heavy over Millfield, a small industrial town nestled in the valleys of northern England. Marian Fletcher checked her daughter's backpack one last time. "Emma, have you got your lunch?" Marian asked, tucking a stray blonde hair behind her ear. 13-year-old Emma rolled her eyes, but smiled. "Yes, Mum. And my water bottle, permission slip, and emergency contact info. It's just the textile museum, not the Amazon rainforest." Marian squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "I know, love. Call me when you get there, all right?" "Promise," Emma replied, planting a quick kiss on her mother's cheek before darting out the door to catch the school bus waiting at the end of their street. Marian watched from the window as Emma's slender figure disappeared into the large yellow bus that would carry 53 students and 3 teachers from Millfield Secondary School to the Regional Textile Heritage Museum, located about 90 minutes away. The fog swallowed the bus as it turned the corner, its tail lights glowing like dying embers before vanishing completely. That was the last time Marian Fletcher saw her daughter. Present day. The fluorescent lights of Millfield Secondary School's administrative office hummed overhead as Marian Fletcher filed away the last of the term's enrollment forms. For years had passed since the disappearance, but the school hallways still echoed with ghosts. Every teenager's laugh, every slam of a locker door was a phantom reminder of Emma. The case had dominated national headlines for months. A school bus carrying 53 children and 3 adults had seemingly evaporated on a foggy Tuesday morning. No crash site, no bodies, no ransom demands, just gone. The search involved hundreds of personnel, helicopters, dogs, volunteer teams combing the countryside. Theories abounded. The bus had driven into a reservoir. It had been hijacked and taken overseas. There had been a mass kidnapping orchestrated by a cult. Every lead turned cold. Every possible route was examined. Nothing. After 2 years, the police investigation was officially classified as ongoing but inactive. The file remained open, but no one was actively working on it. Life in Millfield attempted to resume its normal rhythm, but for the families of the missing children, time had stopped on that foggy morning. Marian had refused to leave Millfield or her job as an administrative assistant at the school. Some called it unhealthy, she called it vigilance. If Emma ever found her way home, Marian would be exactly where she was expected to be. "Marian, would you mind helping me with something?" The voice of Headmaster Richard Blackwood interrupted her thoughts. "My computer is acting up again, and I need to access some files for tomorrow's board meeting." "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," Marian replied, setting aside her work and following him to his office. Richard Blackwood had been headmaster for the past 8 years. In his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he projected the image of a caring educator. After the disappearance, he had been a pillar of support for the community, organizing vigils, speaking to the press, consoling parents. He had even established a scholarship fund in memory of the missing students. Marian sat at his desk and began troubleshooting his computer. "What exactly is the problem, sir?" "It's freezing up whenever I try to access my emails," Blackwood explained, hovering behind her. "I need to retrieve some financial reports that were sent through earlier today." "Let me take a look," Marian said, clicking through diagnostic screens. After a few minutes of tinkering, she managed to restart the email program. "There you go. It should be working now." "Excellent. Thank you, Marian. I've got a meeting with the district superintendent in 5 minutes. Would you mind finishing up here? Just make sure everything's working properly and lock up when you leave." Of course, she replied, continuing to check the system as Blackwood gathered his papers and left the office. Marian was about to close the email program when a notification popped up. A new message had just arrived from an address she didn't recognize, textile_export@globalfabric.net. The subject line read, "Production quota update, urgent." She knew she shouldn't look. It was a violation of privacy, possibly even grounds for dismissal. But something about the email address tugged at her memory. The Textile Museum. The destination the bus never reached. Her finger hovered over the mouse. Then, with a quick glance at the door, she clicked. The email contained only a brief message, weekly production below target. Immediate improvement required. Attached was a file labeled Workforce Documentation, JPG. Marian's hand trembled as she opened the attachment. The image loaded slowly, revealing a dimly lit factory floor. Dozens of young people were hunched over sewing machines, their faces gaunt and tired. Supervisors stood at intervals along the rows, their postures rigid and authoritative. Marian's heart stopped. In the third row, second from the left, was a thin girl with blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Though the face was thinner, the eyes more hollow, Marian would recognize her anywhere. Emma. Her daughter was alive. Marian stared at the screen, her mind racing. Emma was alive. Alive and trapped somewhere, forced to work in what appeared to be a sweatshop. She fumbled for her phone, her first instinct to call the police, but then paused. The email had been sent to Blackwood. Why would the headmaster be receiving updates about a textile factory? A cold realization crept up her spine. She needed to think before acting. If Blackwood was somehow involved, she quickly forwarded the email to her personal account and deleted the forwarded message from the sent folder. Then she took a screenshot of the image and did the same. She closed all windows and logged out of the computer just as she heard footsteps approaching. "All sorted?" Blackwood asked, stepping back into his office. "Yes, sir," Marian replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just a minor glitch. Everything should be working fine now." "Splendid. Thank you for your help." Marian nodded and left the office, her mind spinning with questions and a growing sense of dread. If Blackwood was involved in whatever had happened to the children, who else might be complicit? Who could she trust? That night, Marian examined the photo more closely on her home computer. She enlarged the image, focusing on each face, confirming that at least a dozen of the young workers were children from the missing bus. They appeared thin but alive, their expressions vacant, resigned. In the background of the image, partially obscured by machinery, was a calendar on the wall. Though the image was grainy when zoomed in, Marian could make out what looked like Cyrillic characters. Eastern Europe, perhaps? Russia? Ukraine? She also noticed something odd about the fabric being produced. The pattern seemed to contain repeating elements that didn't make sense from a design perspective, dots and lines that appeared almost like Morse code, Marian whispered to herself. She had learned it as a girl in Scouts. Could it be? She grabbed a pen and paper and began transcribing the pattern, translating the dots and dashes. After an hour of painstaking work, a message emerged. Millfield Help OLD Warehouse District. Marian's hands shook. This was no coincidence. Someone, perhaps Emma herself, had embedded a message into the textile patterns, knowing they might eventually be seen. The next morning, Marian arrived at school earlier than usual. She needed access to the records of the field trip, the original planning documents, the list of attendees, anything that might provide clues. As the administrative assistant, she had legitimate access to the school archives. She found the file labeled Textile Museum Field Trip and began methodically examining its contents. The permission slips, the attendance list, the itinerary all seemed in order. But then she noticed something odd. The bus company listed on the transportation form was Bennett and Amp, Sons Transport, but Marian distinctly remembered seeing Morgan Transit printed on the side of the bus that had taken Emma that morning. She pulled out the school's vendor records. Bennett and Amth, Sons, had been the school's regular transportation provider for years, but there was no record of payment to them for the textile museum trip. Instead, she found an invoice from Morgan Transit, a company she'd never heard of before. Marian searched online for Morgan Transit, but found no website, no business listings, nothing. It was as if the company had never existed. Her next step was to check the visitor records at the textile museum. She called the museum, identifying herself as the school's administrative assistant conducting an audit of past field trips. "I'm sorry, but we have no record of a visit from Millfield Secondary School on that date," the museum coordinator informed her. "In fact, we were closed for renovations that entire month." Marian felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you certain?" There were 53 students and 3 teachers scheduled to visit. "Absolutely certain. We would have records of any group booking, and as I said, the museum wasn't even open then." After hanging up, Marian sat in stunned silence. The trip had been fabricated. But why? And how had so many people, teachers, parents, administrators, been deceived? She thought about the 3 teachers who had disappeared along with the children: Ms. Harlow, the art teacher, Mr. Collins, the history teacher, and Miss Evans, the school nurse who had volunteered to accompany them. Had they been complicit or victims themselves? Marian needed to find the old warehouse district mentioned in the coded message, but she had to be careful. If Blackwood was involved, he might be monitoring her actions. She decided to take a sick day tomorrow to investigate, something she rarely did. As she was leaving the archives, she nearly collided with Blackwood in the hallway. "Marian," he said, his eyebrows raised. "What brings you to the archives so early?" "Just organizing some old files," she replied, clutching the folder to her chest. "Spring cleaning, you know." Your dedication is admirable," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. By the way, the board was impressed with the financial reports. "The school's textile program has been particularly profitable this year." "Textile program?" Marian asked before she could stop herself. "I wasn't aware we had one." Blackwood's smile faltered momentarily. "Oh, it's a new initiative. Vocational training. We've partnered with some manufacturing firms." "I must have mentioned it." "Of course," Marian nodded, pretending to remember. "Well, I should get back to work." As she walked away, she could feel Blackwood's eyes on her back. She'd made a mistake showing her ignorance about the textile program. If he was indeed involved in something sinister, she had just placed herself under suspicion. The old warehouse district of Millfield sat on the town's eastern edge, a relic of the industrial boom of the 1950s and 60s. Most of the buildings now stood abandoned, their windows broken, walls covered in graffiti. Marian parked her car several blocks away and approached on foot, not wanting to draw attention. The area was eerily quiet, save for the occasional seagull and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. Marian consulted the map on her phone, trying to determine which of the dilapidated structures might be the one referenced in the coded message. She walked the perimeter first, noting any signs of recent activity. Most buildings appeared long abandoned, but one stood out. A warehouse with the faded name Millfield Textiles Limited painted on its brick facade had a relatively new padlock on its side entrance, and the weeds around the loading dock had been recently disturbed. Marian approached cautiously, peering through a dirt-streaked window. The interior was dark, but she could make out shapes of machinery covered with tarps. Something about the place sent a shiver down her spine. She tried several windows until finding one with a broken latch. With a quick glance around to ensure no one was watching, she pushed it open and climbed inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of oil and old fabric. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw that the space had been used recently. Footprints disturbed the dust on the floor, leading to and from a metal door at the back of the building. Marian followed the trail, her heart pounding. The door was locked, but a keypad suggested it required a code for entry. Next to the keypad was a small scanner, possibly for ID cards or fobs. She took photos of everything with her phone, documenting the layout of the warehouse. As she examined the machinery, she realized they were industrial textile looms, similar to ones she had seen in pictures of the museum the children had supposedly visited. In a small office area, she found shipping manifests and order forms. Most were years old, dating back to when the warehouse had been legitimately operational, but a few were recent. They documented shipments to various locations in Eastern Europe, primarily Ukraine and Moldova, with vague descriptions of the contents as textile materials and industrial equipment. One shipping label caught her eye. The recipient was listed as Global Fabric Enterprises at an address in Transnistria, a breakaway region between Moldova and Ukraine known for its loose regulations and widespread corruption. The same name as in the email domain that had sent the photo to Blackwood. Marian photographed these documents as well, then continued her search. In a corner of the office, she found a bulletin board with a map of Eastern Europe. Several locations were marked with pins, including one in what appeared to be Transnistria. As she leaned in for a closer look, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the metallic click of the warehouse's main door being unlocked. Marian quickly switched off her phone's light and ducked behind a large filing cabinet. Through a gap between the cabinet and wall, she watched as two men entered the warehouse office. "The shipment needs to go out tonight," said the first man, his voice vaguely familiar. Blackwood's getting nervous. "Says one of the school staff has been asking questions." "Which one?" asked the second man. "Fletcher, the woman whose daughter was on the bus. She's been working in administration since before the operation." Marian held her breath. They were talking about her. "Should we deal with her?" "Not yet. Blackwood wants to handle it his way first. Says she might have family that would ask questions if she suddenly disappeared. Better to discredit her, make it look like grief has finally made her crack." The men continued discussing logistics, mentioning a fresh batch that would be ready for transport within the month. Marian realized with horror that they were planning another abduction. When the men finally left, Marian waited an additional 20 minutes before daring to move. Her mind was racing. She had confirmation now Blackwood was involved in the disappearance of the children, and they were being held somewhere in Eastern Europe, forced to work in textile factories. She needed evidence that the authorities couldn't ignore. But who could she trust? If Blackwood had accomplices, they might include local police officers or other officials. As she was preparing to leave, her foot knocked against something under the desk. Bending down, she found a small package wrapped in fabric. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the pattern. It matched the coded message she had deciphered. With trembling hands, she unwrapped it. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note for Marian Fletcher. From Emma, "We are alive. Trust only Harper." Harper. Detective Laura Harper had been one of the lead investigators on the case 4 years ago. She had been the most persistent, the most thorough, and the most visibly affected when the investigation stalled. She had since been transferred to a different division, but Marian had kept her contact information. Marian tucked the USB drive and note securely into her pocket and made her way back to the broken window. Just as she was about to climb out, she heard the warehouse door opening again. She froze, pressed against the wall beside the window. "I'm telling you, I saw a light in here earlier," came a gruff voice. "Probably just reflections from passing cars," replied another. "We swept the place before we left." "Better safe than sorry. Check the office again." Marian had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and risk discovery, or make a run for it. She chose the latter, scrambling through the window and dropping to the ground outside. She heard shouts behind her as she sprinted away from the warehouse, zigzagging between buildings to throw off pursuit. By the time she reached her car, her lungs were burning, but there was no sign of anyone following her. She drove home by a circuitous route, checking her rearview mirror constantly for any vehicles that might be tailing her. Once home, she locked all doors and windows, drew the blinds, and sat at her kitchen table with the USB drive. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. The drive contained dozens of files, photographs of children working in factories, scanned documents in various languages, and a video file labeled for Mumd MP4. Marian clicked on it, and Emma's face filled the screen. She looked thinner, older, her eyes carrying a weariness no 17-year-old should possess, but she was unmistakably alive. "Mum," Emma began, her voice a hoarse whisper. "If you're watching this, it means our plan worked. We don't have much time, so listen carefully. For years ago, our bus was hijacked. They told us there had been a change of plans, that the museum was closed and we were going to a different educational facility. We realized something was wrong when we crossed the border into France, but by then it was too late." Emma explained how they had been transported across Europe, eventually ending up in a remote factory compound in Transnistria. The operation was part of a human trafficking network that supplied cheap labor to illegal textile factories. The factories produced counterfeit designer goods that were then distributed throughout Europe and beyond. "Headmaster Blackwood is part of it," Emma continued. "He selects the students, arranges the fake trips. The teachers who came with us were drugged and disposed of when they started asking questions. They keep us compliant with threats and occasional examples. But some of us have been planning, finding ways to communicate with the outside world through the textiles we produce." She went on to explain that one of the supervisors, a local woman named Natalia, who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the operation, had helped them create the coded message and smuggle out the USB drive through a sympathetic truck driver. "There are more children coming, Mum. They're planning another disappearance soon. You need to find Detective Harper. She was getting close for years ago, which is why they had her transferred. She has contacts in Interpol who can help. The documents on this drive have coordinates, names, everything you need. But be careful, Blackwood has people everywhere, including the local police." Emma's eyes darted to something off screen, and her voice became more urgent. "I have to go. I love you, Mum. We're going to get through this. Find Harper, show her everything, and watch for the..." The video cut off abruptly. Marian sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. Emma was alive. Her daughter had endured 4 years of captivity and had found the courage and intelligence to reach out. Now it was up to Marian to bring her home. She looked through the other files on the drive, finding maps, employee lists, shipping routes, and financial records that documented a vast operation. Blackwood was just one cog in a much larger machine. Marian knew what she had to do. Tomorrow, she would find Laura Harper and show her everything. But tonight, she needed to ensure the evidence was secure. She made copies of all the files, storing them in multiple locations, including an encrypted email account she set up specifically for this purpose. As she was finishing, her phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Blackwood. Her finger hovered over the screen. Should she answer and pretend everything was normal, or would that somehow give her away? She decided to answer. "Hello." "Marian." Blackwood's voice was smooth, concerned. "I hope I'm not disturbing you at this late hour." "Not at all, sir. Is everything all right?" "Actually, I was calling to ask you the same thing. You seemed distracted today, and then taking a sick day, which isn't like you at all. I wanted to make sure you're holding up okay." Marian swallowed hard, forcing normality into her voice. "Just a migraine, sir. Nothing serious. I should be back tomorrow." "I'm glad to hear that. Rest up and don't worry about coming in too early. In fact, why don't you take another day if you need it?" "Thank you, but I'm sure I'll be fine." There was a pause on the line. "Marian, it's been 4 years now. Have you considered that it might be time to move forward? Perhaps even consider a change of scenery? I have contacts at schools in other districts who would be lucky to have someone with your organizational skills. The implication was clear. Leave Millfield. Abandon your search. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Blackwood, but this is my home. I'm not going anywhere. Another pause. As you wish. But remember, grief can play tricks on the mind. If you ever feel overwhelmed, please don't hesitate to speak with our school counselor. Or me. My door is always open. I'll keep that in mind. Good night, sir. As she hung up, Marian's resolve hardened. Blackwood was trying to get rid of her, first with the suggestion to leave, then with the implication that her grief was affecting her mental stability, laying the groundwork to discredit her, just as the men at the warehouse had discussed. She had to move quickly. Tomorrow, she would find Harper and show her the evidence. Then, together, they would bring down Blackwood and his entire operation. What Marian didn't know was that while she had been exploring the warehouse, a silent alarm had been triggered. And now, outside her home, a car with darkened windows had parked across the street, its occupants settling in for a long night of surveillance. The following morning, Marian left her house at the usual time, acting as if she were heading to work. She noticed the car with darkened windows still parked across the street, confirming her suspicions that she was being watched. Instead of confronting them or altering her routine, she drove to school as normal. Once there, she went through her usual morning preparations, greeting colleagues, sorting through paperwork. She had called Detective Harper early that morning from a public phone booth, arranging to meet during her lunch break at a cafe several towns over. Around mid-morning, Blackwood appeared at her desk. Marian, feeling better today? Much better, thank you, she replied with a forced smile. Excellent. There's been a change to today's schedule. The district superintendent would like us to attend a meeting at the education office this afternoon. Budget discussions. He placed a folder on her desk. These are the figures we'll need. Would you mind driving? My car's in the shop. Marian hesitated. This would disrupt her plans to meet Harper, but refusing would arouse suspicion. Of course. What time should we leave? Right after lunch, around 1 o'clock. He smiled. Thank you, Marian. You're indispensable. As Blackwood walked away, Marian quickly texted Harper from a prepaid phone she had purchased that morning. Meeting delayed. Will contact with new time. She then examined the folder Blackwood had given her. Inside were financial spreadsheets detailing the school's budget. Nothing unusual except for one line item under vocational initiatives that showed a substantial influx of funds from a company called Global Educational Partners. Marian recognized the naming pattern from the email and shipping documents. She took photos of the pages with her phone, then replaced the folder on her desk. At lunchtime, she went to her car, ostensibly to retrieve something she'd forgotten. Instead, she quickly attached the USB drive containing Emma's video and the evidence to the underside of a flower pot outside the school's east entrance, a backup plan in case something happened to her. At precisely 1 o'clock, she met Blackwood in the school parking lot. Ready to go? He asked cheerfully. Yes, sir, Marian replied, unlocking her car. As they drove away from the school, she noticed a dark sedan pulling out behind them. The same car that had been watching her house. Take the bypass, Blackwood instructed. It's faster. The bypass was a relatively new road that skirted the town's industrial area, including the warehouse district. Marian's uneasiness grew, but she complied, keeping an eye on the sedan that maintained a consistent distance behind them. So, these budget discussions, Marian ventured. Anything specific we're advocating for? Expansion, Blackwood replied. The textile program has proven quite successful. The board wants to replicate it in other schools. I see. And what exactly does the program entail? I've never seen it in operation. Blackwood's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. It's specialized, Marian. Limited enrollment. The students who participate learn valuable skills that are highly marketable. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Blackwood spoke again. Take the next exit, please. There's a site I want to show you first. The exit led toward the old warehouse district. Marion's pulse quickened, but she maintained a calm exterior as she followed his directions. They eventually pulled up outside the same warehouse she had broken into the previous day. "What is this place?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "The future," Blackwood replied cryptically. "Let's go inside. There's something I think you should see." Marion's mind raced. She could refuse, create some excuse, but that would only delay the inevitable. Blackwood clearly knew she had been here. Her best option was to play along while looking for an opportunity to escape. They exited the car and approached the warehouse. The dark sedan had parked a discreet distance away, its occupants remaining inside. Blackwood produced a key card, which he swiped across the scanner next to the door. "After you," he said, holding the door open. The warehouse looked different in daylight. The machinery was uncovered now, and several men were working on the textile looms, preparing them for operation. "I don't understand," Marion said, maintaining her pretense. "What is all this?" "An opportunity, Marion," Blackwood replied, guiding her toward the office. "Something I've been wanting to discuss with you for some time." In the office, another man waited, one of the voices she had heard the previous night. "Marion, this is Mr. Kovac," Blackwood introduced. "He represents our Eastern European interests." Kovac, a burly man with a close-cropped beard and cold eyes, nodded curtly. "Mrs. Fletcher, our associates have been impressed with your persistence," Blackwood continued. "For years, and you never gave up searching for Emma. That kind of determination is valuable." Marion's mind whirled. Were they offering her a job? Or was this a prelude to something more sinister? "What exactly are you saying?" she asked. "We're offering you a reunion," Kovac said, his accent thick but his English precise. "And a position within our organization. You have administrative skills we can use." "You want me to work for the people who kidnapped my daughter?" Marion couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "We want you to work with your daughter," Blackwood corrected. "Emma has shown remarkable aptitude. She's been promoted to a supervisory role. With your help, she could advance further." Marion struggled to process what she was hearing. They were trying to recruit her into their human trafficking operation, using Emma as leverage. "And if I refuse?" Blackwood sighed. "Then things become complicated. You've seen too much now. And while we could arrange an accident or a disappearance, it would raise questions, especially given your connection to the original incident." "We prefer cooperation," Kovac added. "Your daughter does too. She asked specifically for you to be brought in." Marion doubted that very much, given Emma's secret message, but she played along. "I'd need proof that Emma is okay, and that she actually wants this." Blackwood smiled. "Of course." He produced a tablet and pulled up a video call application. After a few moments, Emma's face appeared on the screen. She looked well-groomed but tired, her expression carefully neutral. "Hello, Mom." "Emma," Marion breathed, fighting back tears. "Are you all right? Are they treating you well?" Emma's eyes darted to someone off-screen before returning to the camera. "I'm fine. I've been promoted. They're offering you a job too." Her right hand fidgeted with her collar, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood, but also, Marion realized, a subtle signal. Emma's fingers tapped out a pattern, ... Morse code for N, then O. "Tell her about your work, Emma," Kovac prompted from beside Marion. Emma launched into a rehearsed description of her supervisory role, how she ensured quality control and managed younger workers. All the while, her fingers continued their subtle movements. "TRAP. It sounds impressive," Marion said carefully. "I'd need time to think about this offer." "Unfortunately, time is a luxury we don't have," Blackwood replied. "We need your decision now." Marion pretended to consider, buying herself precious seconds to assess her options. The warehouse had only one visible exit, which was likely guarded. Kovac appeared armed, judging by the bulge under his jacket. Blackwood was standing between her and the door. "All right," she finally said. "I accept. On one condition, I want to see Emma in person first." Blackwood and Kovac exchanged glances. "That can be arranged," Kovac said slowly. "We have a shipment leaving for Transnistria tomorrow. You could accompany it." "Perfect," Marian replied with a false smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to use the restroom before we discuss details." Blackwood hesitated, then nodded. "Down the hall, first door on the left. Don't wander." Marian walked calmly out of the office, her mind racing. She had no intention of flying to Eastern Europe with these people. She needed to escape now and contact Harper. As she passed a stack of crates, she discreetly palmed a heavy metal stapler from a nearby workstation. In the bathroom, she quickly sent a text to Harper from her prepaid phone. "Warehouse District, Millfield Textiles Limited, Blackwood involved. Trapped. Evidence at school under East Entrance flower pot. Hurry." She flushed the toilet for effect, then slipped the phone back into her pocket. Taking a deep breath, she exited the bathroom and immediately veered away from the office toward what appeared to be a fire exit at the far end of the warehouse. "Hey," a worker shouted, spotting her. "You can't go that way." Marian broke into a run. Behind her, she heard Blackwood's voice. "Stop her." She reached the fire exit and pushed the bar, setting off an alarm. The door opened onto a small alley between buildings. She sprinted down it, emerging onto a side street. Behind her, she could hear footsteps and shouts. Marian rounded a corner and found herself facing a chain-link fence. Without hesitation, she began climbing, the adrenaline giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. As she reached the top, she felt a hand grasp her ankle. Turning, she saw Kovac below her, his face contorted with anger. Marian swung the stapler, connecting solidly with his temple. He fell back, dazed, and she scrambled over the fence, landing hard on the other side. She continued running, weaving through the maze of abandoned buildings. She could hear vehicles now, engines revving as her pursuers mobilized. She needed to find a hiding place, somewhere to catch her breath and plan her next move. An old loading dock provided temporary shelter. Crouching behind a dumpster, Marian tried to control her ragged breathing. She checked her phone, no response from Harper yet. The sound of approaching vehicles had her moving again. She darted from shadow to shadow, working her way toward the edge of the warehouse district. If she could reach the main road, she might find help or at least witnesses to discourage Blackwood and his men. She was within sight of the road when the dark sedan cut her off, skidding to a halt directly in her path. Two men emerged, advancing toward her with purposeful strides. Marian turned to run back the way she had come, only to find Blackwood there, slightly out of breath but smiling grimly. "That was ill-advised, Marian," he said, shaking his head. "Now we'll have to do this the hard way." As the men closed in from both sides, Marian braced herself for a fight she knew she couldn't win. But then, in the distance, came the welcome sound of police sirens. Blackwood's expression faltered. "Get her in the car, quickly." One of the men grabbed Marian's arm, but she twisted away, shouting for help at the top of her lungs. The sirens grew louder, and suddenly, police vehicles were streaming into the warehouse district from multiple directions. Blackwood and his men scattered, but they were quickly cut off by the arriving officers. Marian sank to her knees in relief as she recognized Detective Laura Harper stepping out of the lead vehicle, weapon drawn. "Down on the ground. All of you," Harper shouted as her fellow officers moved to surround Blackwood and his associates. As Blackwood was being handcuffed, he locked eyes with Marian. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "The operation is bigger than me. They'll still take another busload next week, and you'll never find the others." Harper approached, holstering her weapon. "Marian, are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Marian replied, her voice shaking. But Emma, she's alive. Laura. They're all alive. In Transnistria, working in factories. I have proof, a USB drive hidden at the school, and they're planning another abduction. Harper's expression hardened. We'll get them back. All of them. She turned to a nearby officer. Get me Interpol on the line. Now. The fluorescent lights of Millfield Police Station cast harsh shadows across the incident room. Marian sat wrapped in a blanket, a cup of untouched tea cooling on the table before her. The adrenaline that had carried her through her escape was wearing off, leaving her shaky and exhausted. Detective Laura Harper entered, carrying a laptop and the USB drive retrieved from beneath the flower pot at the school. We've verified the contents, Harper said, sitting across from Marian. It's substantial evidence. Trafficking routes, financial records, and dozens of photographs of the missing children. And Emma's video? Marian asked. Harper nodded. We've authenticated it. Emma is definitely alive, and based on digital markers in the video, it was recorded less than 2 weeks ago. Relief washed over Marian, followed immediately by renewed anxiety. What happens now? Blackwood's been arrested, but Emma said there are others involved. Local police even. Which is why we've brought in outside agencies, Harper explained. I've spent the last 3 years working with a special task force on human trafficking. When I was removed from the original investigation, I never stopped looking. I just had to be more discreet about it. She opened the laptop, showing Marian a map of Eastern Europe with several locations marked. Based on the evidence you provided and our existing intelligence, we believe the children are being held in 3 locations across Transnistria. It's a complicated jurisdiction, not officially recognized as an independent state, minimal international oversight. Can you get them out? We're coordinating with Moldovan authorities and Interpol. There are diplomatic channels being engaged as we speak. Harper hesitated, but we have to move carefully. These operations are typically well guarded, and if they suspect a raid. She didn't need to finish the thought. Marian understood the risk. There's something else, Harper continued, pulling out a folder. After analyzing the financial records on the drive, we've identified several other individuals in positions of authority who appear to be involved. She laid out photographs, 2 local police officers, a council member, and the district superintendent. The superintendent? Marian gasped. That's why Blackwood wanted me to attend that meeting. To deliver you directly to someone higher up in the chain, most likely, Harper confirmed. We're bringing them all in for questioning, but some may have already been alerted by Blackwood's arrest. Marian leaned forward. Emma mentioned another busload being taken Cern. We need to stop that. We're working on it. The USB contained partial details of the next operation, a field trip scheduled for next Monday from Westlake Academy, a private school 20 miles from here. Harper tapped a document showing a trip plan to a science innovation center that, like the textile museum, didn't exist. How many children? 47, plus 2 teachers. Marian felt sick. We have to stop it. We will, Harper assured her. But we need to be strategic. If we move too soon, the organizers might go underground, and we lose our chance to trace the entire network. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young officer entered, looking grim. Detective Harper? Blackwood's lawyer is here. And the superintendent's been brought in. He's demanding to speak with Mrs. Fletcher. Harper's expression darkened. Absolutely not. Mrs. Fletcher is a witness in a major investigation. He's insisting, the officer replied. Says he has information about her daughter that he'll only share with her personally. Marian and Harper exchanged looks. It's a manipulation tactic, Harper warned. He's trying to get to you, possibly threaten you. Or he might actually know something useful, Marian countered. Something that could help find Emma faster. After a tense discussion, they agreed on a compromise. Marian would speak with the superintendent, but in an interrogation room with Harper and two other officers observing from behind the one-way glass and with audio recording. Superintendent Victor Mercer sat at the metal table, his expensive suit incongruous against the stark interrogation room. In his 60s, with silver hair and an air of authority honed over decades in education administration, Mercer had always seemed the model public servant. Mrs. Fletcher, he greeted as Marion entered, his voice carrying the smooth cadence of someone accustomed to board meetings and press conferences. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Marion sat across from him, careful to maintain a neutral expression. "I'm told you have information about my daughter." Mercer leaned forward, lowering his voice despite knowing they were being recorded. "I want to be clear, my involvement was peripheral, administrative, financial management. I never knew children were being harmed." "Spare me," Marion replied coldly. "You're the district superintendent. Nothing happens in those schools without your knowledge." "You'd be surprised," he said with a rueful smile. "But let's not waste time on denials. I want to propose an arrangement." "I'm listening." "I have information, specific coordinates, security protocols, names of key personnel at the factory where your daughter is being held. In exchange, I want consideration during sentencing and protective custody. There are powerful people involved in this operation, people who won't hesitate to silence potential witnesses." Marion studied him, looking for signs of deception. "Why should I believe you have this information?" Mercer reached into his jacket pocket, prompting a knock on the glass from the observers. He slowly withdrew a folded piece of paper, a gesture of good faith, the exact location where Emma is being held, along with the rotation schedule of the guards. They change shifts at 3 a.m., that's when security is lightest. Marion unfolded the paper, finding coordinates written in a precise hand, along with what appeared to be a rough map of a compound. This could be completely fabricated. "It's not," Mercer assured her. "I was in Transnistria 3 months ago for an inspection tour. I saw the operation firsthand. Your daughter is the floor supervisor for the night shift. She's gained their trust. If you expect me to thank you for giving my kidnapped daughter a promotion in a forced labor camp, you're delusional," Marion snapped. Mercer had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mrs. Fletcher. I'm offering a chance to get your daughter back safely. The people running this operation won't hesitate to eliminate evidence if they feel cornered." Before Marion could respond, the door opened and Harper entered. "That's enough," she said firmly. "Mrs. Fletcher is done here." As Mercer was led away, he called over his shoulder, "Verify the information. You'll see I'm telling the truth." Back in the incident room, Harper examined the paper. "We'll cross-reference this with satellite imagery. If it checks out, how quickly can you get a team there?" Marion asked. "That's not up to me. This is an international operation now. But I'll push for urgency." Harper squeezed Marion's shoulder. "We're close, Marion. Closer than we've ever been." Later that evening, Marion was moved to a safe house on the outskirts of town. 2 officers were stationed outside, with Harper occasionally checking in. Marion paced the small living room, unable to rest despite her exhaustion. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "We still have Emma. Cooperation equals her safety. Interference equals consequences. Final warning." Marion immediately called Harper, who arrived at the safe house within 20 minutes, face grim. "They're getting desperate," Harper said after examining the message. "That's good. It means they're feeling the pressure. But it also makes them unpredictable." "What if they hurt her?" Marion whispered. "These operations rely on keeping the workers alive and productive," Harper reasoned. "They've invested years in training these kids. They won't damage their assets unless they have no other option." "That's not exactly comforting." "I know, but we have to stay focused." Harper showed Marion her tablet. "Mercer's information checks out. Satellite imagery confirms the location is indeed a compound with a factory building matching the descriptions from Emma's video. Interpol has agents in the region preparing for coordinated raids on all 3 facilities we've identified. When? 24 hours. Maybe less. They're expediting the approvals now. Marian nodded, determined. I want to be there. Absolutely not, Harper replied firmly. This is a high-risk operation involving multiple international agencies. Besides, you're still a key witness. My daughter has been captive for 4 years, Marian said, her voice steady. I'm not sitting in a safe house while strangers rescue her. I'm coming, even if I have to find my own way there. Harper recognized the determination in Marian's eyes, the same determination that had kept her searching for 4 years when everyone else had given up. After a lengthy discussion, a compromise was reached. Marian would travel to Moldova with an Interpol liaison and remain at the command post during the operation, close enough to be reunited with Emma promptly but safely away from the actual raid. As dawn broke, Marian packed a small bag, her mind racing with hope and fear in equal measure. In less than 48 hours, she might finally hold her daughter again, assuming everything went according to plan. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, a guard at the Transnistrian compound was discovering a broken lock on the supply room where communication equipment was stored. And Emma Fletcher, having risked everything on one desperate gamble, was no longer where she was supposed to be. The factory compound stood in stark isolation amidst the rolling countryside of Transnistria, surrounded by high fences topped with barbed wire. What had once been a legitimate textile manufacturing facility had been repurposed into something far more sinister, a site where children worked 12-hour shifts producing counterfeit designer goods that would be sold throughout Europe and beyond. 20 minutes before the 3 a.m. guard shift change, Emma Fletcher crouched in the shadows behind the dormitory building, her heart pounding. Beside her were 2 other teenagers from the original bus, Daniel Harrison and Mia Chun. Like Emma, they had been promoted to supervisory roles over the years, a calculated move by their captors to create a hierarchy that would help maintain control over the younger workers. The camera blind spot lasts exactly 40 seconds, Emma whispered, checking her makeshift timer, a modified digital watch she had painstakingly reprogrammed during her supervised electronics training. Once the current patrol passes, we'll have less than a minute to cross to the perimeter fence. Daniel, once a gangly 13-year-old and now a tall 17-year-old with hollow cheeks and wary eyes, nodded. And you're sure about the section of fence? Positive, Emma confirmed. I counted the voltage surges during my last inspection round. That section has been malfunctioning for weeks. They keep postponing repairs because it's at the back of the compound where they think no one would attempt an escape. Mia, small and wiry with close-cropped dark hair, clutched a small package. And you really think this will work? That someone will find this. It has to, Emma replied. We've tried everything else. The coded textiles, the USB drive through Natalia, we have no way of knowing if any of it reached the outside world. This is our best chance to let people know exactly where we are. The package contained a makeshift transmitter assembled from components stolen piece by piece over months from the factory's electronics section, where some of the older teens were taught basic technical skills to maintain the machinery. It wouldn't have much range, but it might be enough to be picked up by passing aircraft or border patrol radios. The guards made their final pass before the shift change, moving predictably along their usual route. Emma watched them disappear around the corner of the main factory building. Now, she hissed. The 3 teenagers sprinted across the open ground, keeping low. Emma counted the seconds in her head, 15, 20, 25, as they reached the perimeter fence. Daniel immediately began working on the section they had identified, using insulated tools he had smuggled from the maintenance shed. Hurry, Mia urged, keeping watch. Daniel's hands moved with practiced precision despite his nerves. At 38 seconds, he had created an opening just large enough for them to squeeze through. You first, Emma told Mia, who was the smallest. Mia slipped through without difficulty, taking the transmitter package with her. Daniel went next, his larger frame barely fitting through the gap. As Emma prepared to follow, a spotlight suddenly swept across the yard behind them. "Emma, come on," Daniel whispered urgently from the other side. Emma glanced back. The new shift of guards had arrived early. In seconds, they would have a direct line of sight to the fence. Making a split-second decision, Emma pushed the wire back into place. "Go," she mouthed to her friends. "Get to the coordinates. Stick to the plan. I'll distract them." Before they could protest, Emma darted away from the fence, deliberately making herself visible to the approaching guards. "Hey," she shouted, waving her arms. "There's a breach in the northeast section." The guards immediately changed direction, several of them running toward her while others moved toward the opposite side of the compound from where Daniel and Mia had escaped. Emma allowed herself to be caught, struggling just enough to seem authentic without risking serious punishment. "I saw someone," she gasped as the guards restrained her. "By the northeast fence. I tried to stop them." The guard captain, a brutish man named Vasily, regarded her suspiciously. "Why were you outside during curfew, supervisor?" "Bathroom break," Emma replied quickly. "Then I heard a noise. I thought it was my responsibility to investigate." Vasily studied her for a long moment. Emma had carefully cultivated her reputation as a reliable supervisor over the years, making herself valuable to the operation. Finally, he nodded. "Check the northeast perimeter," he ordered his men. "And get Fletcher back to the dormitory. Full inspection of all workers in the morning." As Emma was escorted back to the dormitory, she allowed herself a small smile. Daniel and Mia had made it. They would activate the transmitter at the coordinates she had calculated, a hilltop with minimal interference, close enough to a border patrol route to have a chance of being detected. The plan wasn't for them to escape permanently. That would be nearly impossible given their location and the language barrier. Rather, they would transmit their SOS signal for as long as the battery lasted, then make their way back to the compound and slip in during the day shift when the delivery trucks arrived, using the chaos of the loading dock as cover. If all went well, no one would even know they had been gone. If not, Emma pushed away the thought. The risk was worth taking after 4 years of captivity. Morning brought a compound-wide search and head count. Emma's heart raced when the guards announced that 2 workers were missing, but the subsequent confusion over exactly which 2, there were frequent clerical errors in the record-keeping, gave her hope that Daniel and Mia's absence might not be immediately connected to her nighttime alert. As the workers were assembled in the main yard, Emma caught sight of a familiar figure being escorted across the compound. Natalia, the supervisor who had helped them smuggle out the USB drive. She was being led by 2 men in suits rather than the usual guards, administrative personnel rather than security. Something was happening. Throughout the day, Emma noticed increased activity among the management. Additional guards were posted, and several vehicles arrived carrying equipment and more men in suits. During her shift supervising the textile printing section, Emma overheard fragments of conversation in both Russian and English. Moving the operation. Compromised. Immediate relocation. Her blood ran cold. They were planning to move the workers, possibly split them up among different facilities. If that happened before any rescue could be mounted, Emma needed to get a message out. During her brief break, she made her way to the section where the youngest children worked, threading bobbins and performing other simple tasks. Among them was 10-year-old Lily Cooper, who had been abducted along with her older brother in a separate operation 2 years earlier. "Lily," Emma whispered as she pretended to inspect the girl's work. "I need you to do something important. Remember that pattern I taught you? The special one?" Lily nodded solemnly. Her small fingers had proven exceptionally adept at weaving subtle variations into textile patterns, variations that, when seen by the right eyes, contained coded messages. I need you to work it into every piece you handle today. Can you do that without being caught? Yes, Emma, Lily whispered back. What's the message? MOVNG, Emma spelled out. SON. She didn't know if anyone would see it, if their previous attempts at communication had even reached the outside world, but she had to try. As evening approached, Emma was summoned to the administration building, an unusual occurrence that immediately set her on edge. She was led to an office where a man she had never seen before sat behind a desk. Thin-faced with cold, calculating eyes, he regarded her with clinical interest. Emma Fletcher, he said, his accent marking him as British. I've heard good things about your work here. Emma remained silent, standing with the practiced rigid posture expected of workers when addressing management. My name is Cartwright, the man continued. I oversee several operations like this one. I understand you helped alert security to a potential breach last night. Yes, sir, Emma replied neutrally. Cartwright smiled thinly. Loyal, efficient. These are valuable qualities. He pushed a folder across the desk. Your mother has been asking questions again, causing problems. Emma's heart skipped, but she kept her expression blank. Her mother was still looking for her, still fighting. The thought gave her strength. I believe in incentives, Emma, Cartwright continued. Positive and negative. Your performance here has earned you consideration for advancement. There's a new facility opening soon, more modern, better conditions. You could have a management position there, overseeing an entire production floor. Thank you, sir, Emma said carefully. However, Cartwright's voice hardened. This offer is contingent on your continued cooperation. Specifically, I need you to do two things. First, maintain order among the workers during our upcoming relocation. Second, record a video message to your mother, assuring her that you are well and happy in your new life abroad, having chosen to leave England behind. Emma's mind raced. The request confirmed her fears about relocation, but it also suggested her mother was getting close enough to have the operations leadership worried. When will we be relocating, sir? She asked, buying time to think. Soon. Days, not weeks. Cartwright leaned forward. Your answer, Miss Fletcher? Emma knew immediate acceptance would seem suspicious. May I have time to consider? It's a significant responsibility. Cartwright studied her for a moment, then nodded. Until tomorrow morning. But remember, opportunities like this don't come along often. And there are always alternatives. The threat was clear. As Emma was escorted back to the workers' quarters, her mind worked furiously. The operation was preparing to move, possibly within days. Daniel and Mia were out there with the transmitter. Her mother was somehow causing enough trouble to concern people like Cartwright. It was all coming to a head, and Emma needed to be ready to act when the moment came. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, an Interpol surveillance team was picking up the signal from Daniel and Mia's transmitter, and Detective Laura Harper was showing Marion Fletcher satellite imagery of the compound where her daughter was being held. The clock was ticking for everyone involved. The operations center in Chisinau, Moldova's capital, buzzed with activity. Maps covered the walls, computer screens displayed satellite imagery, and personnel from multiple agencies coordinated in several languages. Marion Fletcher sat beside Detective Harper, watching as final preparations were made for the coordinated raids on 3 facilities across Transnistria. We've confirmed activity at all 3 locations, an Interpol coordinator named Rousseau was explaining. But there's been an interesting development at the main compound, the one where we believe your daughter is being held. He pulled up enhanced satellite images showing vehicle movement and personnel activity. There's been a significant increase in transport vehicles arriving over the past 12 hours. They appear to be preparing for some kind of evacuation or relocation. They know we're coming, Harper concluded grimly. Possibly, Rousseau agreed. But that's not all. 6 hours ago, we detected a weak radio signal originating from approximately 2 kilometers from the compound. It was a repeating SOS message with identification information for two of the missing children, Daniel Harrison and Mia Chun. Marion leaned forward intently. They escaped. Temporarily, it seems. Our surveillance team observed them returning to the compound through a delivery entrance several hours after the transmission began. It was extremely well coordinated. They created a distraction that allowed them to slip back in undetected by the guards. That had to be Emma's plan, Marion said with certainty. She's always been strategic, even as a child. Chess championships, puzzle competitions, she has a gift for seeing patterns and planning moves ahead. Harper nodded. The signal also included a crude map of the compound's interior, which has been invaluable for our tactical planning. We've also intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to move the workers within the next 24 hours, Rousseau added, which means our timetable has accelerated. The raids are now scheduled for 0 to 100 hours. Marion checked her watch. Less than 5 hours away. We've identified the likely location of your daughter within the compound, Rousseau continued, pulling up a schematic. Based on the information from the radio transmission and our surveillance, she appears to be housed in the supervisor's quarters here. He pointed to a small building adjacent to the main factory. What about the other children? Marion asked. Distributed throughout these dormitory buildings. We estimate approximately 120 individuals under 18 at this compound alone, including the original 53 from your daughter's school and others from subsequent abductions. The scale of the operation was staggering. Marion felt a mixture of hope and dread. After 4 years of searching, she was hours away from potentially being reunited with Emma. But if anything went wrong, I want to be closer, Marion said suddenly. Not here in the capital, somewhere near the compound, so I can be there immediately when Emma is found. Predictably, both Harper and Rousseau objected on safety grounds, but Marion was adamant. After heated discussion, another compromise was reached. Marion would be taken to a forward command post approximately 5 kilometers from the compound, where she would remain with a liaison officer during the operation. As preparations continued, Marion stepped outside for a breath of air. The night was cool and clear, stars visible above the city lights. She thought of all the nights over the past 4 years when she had looked at the same stars, wondering if Emma could see them too, wherever she was. Her phone buzzed with a message, a secure communication from the technical team, intercepted internal email from Compound. Subject identified as E. Fletcher scheduled for video recording tomorrow morning. Possible course statement. Operation proceeding as planned. Marion's resolve hardened. They were going to force Emma to record a false statement, probably to try to call off the search. It confirmed they were feeling the pressure, but it also meant time was running out. 3 hours later, Marion found herself in an unmarked van with Harper and 2 Interpol agents, driving along dark country roads toward the Transnistrian border. Special arrangements had been made for their crossing, a necessity given the complicated quasi-recognized status of the breakaway region. Once we reach the forward command post, you'll remain there with Agent Keller, Harper explained, indicating one of the Interpol officers. I'll be joining the tactical team as an observer. Marion nodded, too tense for words. After years of dead ends and false hopes, everything was happening with dizzying speed. The forward command post turned out to be an abandoned farmhouse, repurposed with satellite communications equipment and tactical displays. As the raid teams made their final preparations, Marion watched from a window, the compound visible in the distance as a collection of lights on the dark landscape. 2 minutes to execution came the announcement over the secure communications system. Marion held her breath, her hands clenched into fists. Teams in position. Green light. Go, go, go. From her vantage point, Marion saw tiny, dark figures moving across the compound perimeter. Then came flashes of light, stun grenades being deployed, followed by the faint sound of alarms. The operation had begun. Emma Fletcher was awakened by the sound of alarms. She had been sleeping lightly, anticipating trouble after the day's events. Around her, the other supervisors were stirring in confusion. "Security breach," announced a voice over the loudspeaker system. "All workers remain in quarters. Security personnel to designated positions." Emma slipped on her shoes and moved to the window. In the distance, she could see figures moving along the perimeter fence. The compound was under attack or being rescued. Either way, this was the moment she had been preparing for. "Everyone stay calm," she announced to the panicking supervisors. "Follow the emergency protocols." But instead of herding them toward the designated shelter area, Emma led them toward the main dormitories where the youngest children were housed. If this was indeed a rescue operation, the children would be terrified and confused. Outside, she could hear shouting, the popping sound of stun grenades, and the crackle of radios. Guards were running toward the perimeter, weapons drawn. Emma reached the children's dormitory just as a group of guards arrived, led by Vasily. "Fletcher, what are you doing here?" he demanded. Gathering the children for evacuation, as per protocol, she replied with invented confidence. Vasily hesitated, then nodded. "Get them to the transport vehicles. We're implementing the contingency plan." This was exactly what Emma had feared. They would try to move the children before the rescuers could reach them. But it also presented an opportunity. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Children, form lines as practiced. Quickly now." As the confused and frightened children assembled, Emma whispered instructions to the other supervising teenagers she trusted. "Slow everything down. Misunderstand orders. Get separated from the main group if you can. The people coming are here to help us." Outside, the situation was deteriorating for the compound security. Through windows, Emma could see figures in tactical gear moving methodically from building to building. Professional, organized. This was no random attack. It had to be a coordinated rescue operation. Vasily returned, now visibly agitated. "Change of plans. We're moving the special assets only. Fletcher, Chin, Harrison, and the other supervisors. The rest will have to be left." Emma's blood ran cold. They were planning to abandon the majority of the children, taking only those they considered most valuable, the ones who had been trained for supervisory roles and knew the most about the operation. "Sir, we can't leave the children unattended," she protested. "Those are your orders," Vasily snapped. "Management vehicles are preparing at the rear exit. Move now." Emma made eye contact with Daniel and Mia across the room. A silent understanding passed between them. They would not leave the others behind. Not after everything they had endured together. As they were being escorted toward the administrative building, Emma saw her chance. A stun grenade detonated near the perimeter fence, sending guards scrambling for cover. In the momentary confusion, she whispered urgently to Daniel and Mia, "Get back to the dormitories. Barricade the doors. Keep everyone inside until the rescue teams reach you." "What about you?" Mia asked. "I'm going to find Cartwright. He's the key to all of this. He has records, names, locations of other facilities." Before they could protest, Emma slipped away, using the shadows and her knowledge of the compound to make her way toward the administrative building. She knew she was taking a terrible risk, but after 4 years of captivity and careful planning, she couldn't let the architect of their suffering escape. Inside the building, she found chaos. Staff were shredding documents, smashing computer equipment, erasing evidence. Emma moved carefully through the corridors, searching for Cartwright's office. She found him hurriedly packing files into a leather briefcase, a satellite phone to his ear. "I don't care how you do it," he was saying. "Just make sure the vehicles are ready. And contact our people at the border. We'll need expedited passage." Emma stepped into the doorway. "It's over, Mr. Cartwright." He whirled around, his face contorting with anger when he saw her. "Fletcher, I should have known you'd be trouble." He reached into his desk drawer, but Emma was faster, having anticipated the move. She grabbed a heavy metal paperweight from his desk and brought it down on his wrist. Cartwright howled in pain, the gun he'd been reaching for clattering to the floor. For years, Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady. For years of our lives stolen. 53 children. How many others in your other facilities? Hundreds? Thousands? You understand nothing, Cartwright spat, cradling his injured wrist. This is business. Economics. Those children had no futures in their small-town lives. Here, they learned skills, discipline. Save it, Emma interrupted. The only thing we learned was that monsters wear expensive suits and talk about economics while trafficking children. Outside, the sounds of the operation were getting closer. Emma could hear voices shouting in English now, clear and authoritative, law enforcement, not guards. Cartwright lunged suddenly, not for the gun, but for the door. Emma moved to block him, but he was stronger, shoving her aside and sprinting down the corridor. Emma recovered quickly and followed, determined not to let him escape. The chase led them through the administrative building and out onto the compound grounds, now illuminated by searchlights from helicopters overhead. Emma could see tactical teams methodically securing buildings, escorting bewildered workers to safety. Cartwright was heading for the vehicle depot at the rear of the compound. Emma shouted as loudly as she could, "Stop him. He's in charge." The man in the suit. A spotlight swung in their direction. Cartwright, realizing he was exposed, changed direction, heading instead for a side gate used for maintenance access. Emma pursued relentlessly, her determination fueled by 4 years of suppressed anger. As Cartwright reached the gate and fumbled with the lock, she caught up to him, tackling him to the ground with strength born of desperation. "Enough," she gasped, struggling to restrain him. "It's finished." Cartwright fought viciously, landing a blow to Emma's face that sent her reeling. He scrambled to his feet, but before he could escape, the gate burst open. Tactical officers swarmed through, weapons raised. On the ground, "Now," they shouted in English. Cartwright froze, then slowly raised his hands. As he was being restrained, Emma heard a familiar voice among the tactical team. "Emma Fletcher?" asked a female officer, approaching cautiously. "I'm Detective Laura Harper. I've been working with your mother to find you." Emma's knees went weak with relief and exhaustion. "My mother? She's here." "She's nearby," Harper confirmed, her voice gentle. "She never stopped looking for you. Not for a single day in 4 years." Tears filled Emma's eyes, the first she had allowed herself in a very long time. The others she managed to say. There are more children, in the dormitories, and other facilities in other locations. "We know," Harper assured her. "Operations are underway at all identified locations. You're safe now, all of you." As the compound was secured building by building, the full extent of the operation became clear. 126 minors were recovered from this facility alone, including all 53 from the original Millfield school bus. Medical teams attended to the children, many of whom were suffering from malnutrition and various health issues from years of overwork in poor conditions. Emma was taken to a medical station for evaluation, where she was reunited with Daniel, Mia, and the other supervisors who had helped maintain hope among the younger children through the years of captivity. "You did it," Daniel said, his voice filled with wonder. "Your plans, your coded messages, they actually worked." Emma shook her head. "We all did it. Every coded textile pattern, every smuggled message, every bit of information we managed to get out. And my mother never gave up." As dawn broke over the compound, now secured and filled with rescue personnel rather than guards, Emma was led to a transport vehicle. She climbed in, exhausted but alert, still not quite believing the nightmare was truly ending. The vehicle drove through the main gate, leaving the compound behind. After a short journey, they arrived at what appeared to be an old farmhouse, now serving as a command center. As Emma stepped out of the vehicle, the farmhouse door opened. A figure stood silhouetted against the light from inside, a figure Emma would have recognized anywhere, despite the passing years. "Mom," Emma whispered. Marion Fletcher stood frozen for a moment, then ran forward, covering the distance between them in seconds. They collided in an embrace so fierce it nearly knocked them both over. "Emma," Marion sobbed, holding her daughter's face in her hands, studying every detail as if to reassure herself this was real. "My brave, brilliant girl." Emma clung to her mother, for years of enforced stoicism crumbling in an instant. "You found me. You actually found me." Over her mother's shoulder, Emma could see other reunions taking place as more children arrived from the compound. Parents who had traveled from England upon receiving word of the operation were embracing their children, many for the first time in 4 years. "How?" Emma asked when she could finally speak. "How did you find us?" Marion smiled through her tears. "You led me to you. Your coded fabric patterns, your hidden messages, I found them. And once I started looking in the right places, I discovered Blackwood's involvement, the warehouse in Millfield." Blackwood, Emma spat the name. "He was part of it from the beginning." "Blackwood," Emma repeated, her voice steadier now. "He was part of it from the beginning. The school trips were his idea, testing grounds to see which children could be manipulated, which ones might be missed the least." Marion nodded grimly. "He's in custody now, along with the local officers who helped cover up the disappearances. But the network is bigger than we imagined. International." Detective Harper approached, tablet in hand. "Emma, I hate to interrupt, but we need your help identifying the remaining facilities. Cartwright's files mention 3 more locations, but the coordinates are encrypted." Emma straightened, wiping away tears. "I can help with that." Cartwright used a numerical substitution based on production output figures. I memorized the pattern when I was retrieving records for him. Marion watched with a mixture of pride and heartbreak as her daughter immediately shifted into the focused, strategic mindset that had kept her alive for 4 years. No longer the carefree 14-year-old who had boarded the school bus, Emma moved with the deliberate precision of someone who had survived by noticing everything, calculating every risk. Working with Harper and the Interpol team, Emma decoded the coordinates for additional facilities in Ukraine, Romania, and Bulgaria. While tactical teams were dispatched, Emma provided detailed information about the operation structure, the hierarchy, the training methods, the distribution networks for the counterfeit goods they produced. "The factories are just one part of it," Emma explained, pointing to a map where she had marked locations. "They have warehouses throughout Europe, shipping routes disguised as legitimate imports, even retail fronts in major cities." Agent Rousseau looked impressed. "You've mapped their entire supply chain." "For years of watching, listening, memorizing," Emma said simply. "I knew we'd only get one chance at escape. I wanted to make sure it counted." As they worked, more parents arrived at the command center, directed there after frantic calls from authorities. The scene outside the farmhouse transformed into a mixture of tearful reunions and medical triage as children with various health issues were attended to. Marion watched through the window as a small girl, no more than 10, was reunited with her parents, the family collapsing into a tangle of arms and tears. "That's Lily Cooper," Emma said softly beside her. "She and her brother were taken 2 years ago. Lily helped me smuggle coded messages in the textile patterns." "How did you maintain hope?" Marion asked, her voice breaking. "All those years." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I knew you wouldn't stop looking, and I had the others to protect. The younger ones needed someone to believe escape was possible." A commotion outside drew their attention. A black SUV had arrived, and from it emerged a familiar figure, Superintendent Victor Mercer, now in handcuffs, escorted by armed officers. "What's he doing here?" Marion asked, tensing. "Part of the deal," Harper explained, joining them at the window. "In exchange for his cooperation, he's been permitted to make a formal identification of key personnel at the site for his testimony." Emma's expression hardened. He was at the compound 3 months ago. He called it an inspection tour, but he was really checking on his investment. The children were just inventory to him. As Mercer was led past the window, his eyes met Emma's. Something flickered across his face, not quite remorse, but a grudging recognition of defeat. Emma held his gaze unflinchingly until he was taken into the building. Inside, Mercer was brought to a secure room where Detective Harper and Agent Rousseau waited. Marion and Emma observed through a one-way glass, listening to the superintendent's detailed confession. The operation began 8 years ago, Mercer explained in his refined, educational administrator's voice. I was approached by investors looking for low-cost manufacturing solutions. The concept was presented as a vocational training opportunity for underprivileged youth, room, board, and skills training in exchange for apprentice-level work. Spare us the euphemisms, Harper cut in. You were trafficking children. Mercer shifted uncomfortably. It evolved. The profit margins were extraordinary. Designer knockoffs produced at a fraction of legitimate manufacturing costs, sold at just below market rate. The mathematics were compelling. The mathematics, Marion whispered bitterly from behind the glass. Emma squeezed her hand. Blackwood was essential to the recruitment process, Mercer continued. As a headmaster, he could identify vulnerable children, those with difficult home situations or limited parental supervision. The school trips were his innovation, a clean method of acquiring workers with minimal connection to the schools themselves. And the local police? Rousseau prompted. Paid to mishandle the investigations, lose evidence, discourage parents, Mercer replied matter-of-factly. Most small-town police forces are underpaid, understaffed. It wasn't difficult to find officers willing to look the other way. Emma turned to her mother. I've heard enough, she said quietly. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. That's what matters now. As they stepped away from the observation room, Harper approached with news. The operations in Ukraine and Romania were successful. We've recovered another 93 children, including 31 from the UK. The Bulgarian site had been evacuated, but we're tracking the transport vehicles. Emma nodded. They'll be headed to the contingency location, an abandoned mining facility in northern Serbia. I overheard Cartwright discussing it with facility managers last month. Harper looked at her with newfound respect. You really did memorize everything. I had to, Emma replied simply. That evening, as medical evaluations continued and arrangements were made to transport the recovered children home, Emma sat with her mother on the steps of the farmhouse, watching the sunset. What happens now? Emma asked, her voice small for the first time since their reunion. Marion wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We go home. You get medical care, counseling. You return to being a teenager, not a supervisor or a resistance leader. Emma leaned against her mother. I'm not sure I remember how to do that. We'll figure it out together, Marion promised. One day at a time. Later, as temporary accommodations were arranged for the night, Emma reunited with Daniel, Mia, and the other teens who had formed her inner circle during captivity. They're saying we'll all be flown home tomorrow, Daniel said, still looking slightly dazed by the rapid turn of events. What about the others? Mia asked. The ones from different countries? Interpol is handling family notifications and repatriation, Emma explained. No one gets left behind. The group fell silent, the enormity of their freedom still sinking in. They had spent years surviving together, developing their own language of subtle glances and coded phrases, unified by their shared captivity. Now, they faced the prospect of separation, returning to lives and families that had continued without them. We should exchange contact information, Emma said finally. Real addresses, phone numbers. We'll need each other in the days ahead. The others nodded in agreement, understanding what remained unspoken, that only they truly knew what they had endured and what they would now face in rejoining the world. 3 days later, Marion and Emma stood outside their home in Millfield, staring at the familiar front door as if it belonged to a museum exhibit, recognizable but distanced by time. It hasn't changed, Emma said softly. Marian smiled. I couldn't change anything. It would have felt like giving up. The homecoming was quiet. Marian had requested privacy, declining the media interviews and public statements that inevitably followed such a high-profile rescue. The local press had respected the boundary, reporting the facts without intrusion. Inside, Emma moved through the house like a visitor, touching familiar objects with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Her bedroom remained exactly as she had left it, posters on the walls, books on the shelves, the desk calendar still showing the month of her disappearance. I'll understand if you want to redecorate, Marian said from the doorway. Make it feel more current. Emma shook her head. Not yet. This is good for now. The following weeks brought a careful reintegration into normal life. Medical evaluations confirmed what Emma had already known: malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, repetitive strain injuries from factory work. More concerning to the specialists were the psychological impacts: hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, structured thinking patterns that had been survival mechanisms in captivity but now manifested as rigid routines and anxiety when those routines were disrupted. Emma attended therapy sessions, initially resistant but gradually opening up as she recognized the parallels between her survival strategies and the therapeutic process. Both required systematic approaches to complex problems. Marian took extended leave from her teaching position, dedicating herself to Emma's recovery. They established new routines together, rebuilding trust and connection. In the evenings, they would sit in the garden, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in the same space, a luxury neither had experienced in 4 years. 6 weeks after their return, Detective Harper visited with an update on the case. The prosecutions are moving forward, she explained over tea in the kitchen. Cartwright, Mercer, Blackwood, and 17 others have been charged under human trafficking statutes. The evidence is overwhelming. Your coded messages, Emma, combined with the financial records and Mercer's testimony. They're looking at decades in prison. What about the Westlake Academy trip? Marian asked. The next group they were planning to take? Cancelled, of course. The school administration had no idea. It was arranged directly through the district office, bypassing normal channels. We've implemented new verification protocols across all schools in the region. Emma, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. And the other children? The ones we rescued. Harper's expression softened. Progress varies. Some are adjusting well, others are struggling. The psychological services team is coordinating care plans based on individual needs. We should have a gathering, Emma said suddenly. Not all of us, that would be overwhelming, but maybe the supervisors, the ones who work together. We need to check on each other. Marian and Harper exchanged glances. That's actually a good idea, Harper said. Controlled environment, appropriate support present. I can help arrange it. 2 weeks later, Emma found herself in a community center meeting room, surrounded by familiar faces: Daniel, Mia, and 5 other teens who had formed the core resistance within the compound. They had all changed, hair grown out, hollow cheeks filled in, factory pallor replaced by the healthy glow of regular meals and outdoor time, but they recognized each other instantly. The reunion began awkwardly, with formal greetings and careful distance. But as they began to share their experiences of returning home, the artificial barriers dissolved. My parents reorganized my room, Daniel said with a half smile. Everything's in the wrong place now. I keep reaching for things that aren't there anymore. My sister treats me like I'm made of glass, Mia added, always asking if I'm okay, if I need anything. I know she means well, but it makes you feel like you're still different, still separate, Emma finished for her. The others nodded in understanding. Gradually, the conversation shifted from readjustment struggles to small victories, returning to school, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering abandoned hobbies. They shared coping strategies and resources, forming a support network that bridged the gap between their shared past and individual futures. As the gathering concluded, Emma found herself standing with Daniel by the refreshment table. "You know what's strange," he said, watching the others say their goodbyes. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me what to do next. For years of following schedules, never making decisions." "Freedom is its own kind of adjustment," Emma agreed. "Sometimes I catch myself watching the clock, thinking I should be at my station in the factory." Daniel nodded. "But it gets better each day, doesn't it? The choices get easier." "They do," Emma confirmed, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. That evening, Emma sat with her mother in their living room, sharing details of the reunion. Marian listened attentively, noting the animation in Emma's voice, the most alive she had seemed since their return. "I'm thinking about going back to school in the fall," Emma said suddenly. "Not my old school, too many memories there, but maybe the comprehensive in Westfield." Marian smiled, careful not to overreact to this significant step. "I think that sounds wonderful. Whenever you're ready. And I want to learn more about international law," Emma continued. "Specifically, human trafficking enforcement. Detective Harper mentioned there are gaps in existing legislation, jurisdictional issues that made our case more complicated than it should have been." Marian recognized the spark in her daughter's eyes, the same focused determination that had helped her survive and ultimately escape captivity, now channeled toward healing and purpose. "One step at a time," Marian reminded her gently. "But I think that's a brilliant direction." Later that night, as Emma slept, Marian sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, reviewing the day's mail. Among the bills and routine correspondence was an envelope with official government letterhead. Opening it, she found an invitation to join a newly formed task force on human trafficking prevention in educational settings, her experience as both a teacher and the parent of a trafficking survivor considered uniquely valuable. Marian set the letter aside, uncertain. Part of her wanted to leave the entire experience behind, to focus solely on Emma's recovery and their rebuilt life together. But another part recognized that their story, painful as it was, could help prevent other families from experiencing similar trauma. She would discuss it with Emma in the morning, she decided. They would make the decision together, as they had promised to do with all significant choices moving forward. 1 year later, Marian stood at a podium in London, addressing an international conference on human trafficking prevention. Behind her was a slide showing statistics, cases identified, networks dismantled, children recovered over the previous 12 months. The Millfield case revealed critical vulnerabilities in our systems, she explained to the gathered law enforcement officials, educators, and policymakers. School trips that weren't properly verified, missing persons investigations conducted without appropriate oversight, international cooperation hampered by jurisdictional complications. Each of these gaps has now been addressed through legislative and procedural reforms. In the audience, Emma sat beside Detective Harper, now promoted to lead a specialized unit focused on trafficking cases. At 18, Emma was no longer the shell-shocked survivor who had emerged from captivity. She had completed her first year of A-levels with distinguished results and had already received conditional offers from universities with strong international law programs. But the most important lesson, Marian continued, is that we must listen to parents who insist something is wrong. When a child vanishes, the easiest explanation is rarely the correct one. Had authorities taken my concerns seriously from the beginning, dozens of children might have been spared years of captivity and exploitation. After the presentation, during the networking reception, Emma found herself approached by a woman in her 30s with credentials identifying her as a UN representative. "Emma Fletcher? I'm Alessandra Moretti from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Your mother's presentation was compelling, but I'm particularly interested in your perspective. I understand you've been documenting your experiences for potential use in training materials." Emma nodded. I've been working with psychologists to develop age-appropriate resources for schools, warning signs, safety protocols, that sort of thing. We're assembling a youth advisory council on trafficking prevention, Alessandra explained. Students from various backgrounds, including survivors, to ensure our approaches actually make sense to the people we're trying to protect. Would you be interested in participating? Before Emma could respond, a familiar figure approached Mia Chin, now working as a peer counselor for trafficking survivors. Emma, I was hoping to find you here, Mia said, embracing her friend before turning to Alessandra. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Mia Chen, I work with the Sunrise Recovery Program. Alessandra finished, recognition dawning. Your trauma-informed approach to survivor reintegration is exactly the kind of methodology we're looking to incorporate. As the conversation continued, Emma felt a wave of satisfaction. What had begun as a personal nightmare had evolved into meaningful work not just for her, but for her fellow survivors as well. Daniel was studying computer science, developing software to identify trafficking patterns in online activity. Lily Cooper, now 12, was working with child psychologists to better understand how young children process trauma. Later that evening, Emma and Marion sat in their hotel room reviewing the day's events. The UN representative wants me to join their youth council, Emma said, still processing the offer. It would mean some travel, meetings in Geneva and New York. Marion smiled. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. It's strange, Emma mused. For years ago, I couldn't imagine ever leaving Millfield again. Now I'm considering international travel. That's healing, Marion said simply. Emma nodded, then reached for her laptop. I want to show you something. I've been working on it for a while. She opened a document titled The Vanishing Class, a Survivor's Account. It's not finished, Emma explained hesitantly. And I'm not sure if I'll ever want to publish it, but I needed to write it down to give it structure outside my head. Marion read the opening paragraphs, tears forming in her eyes. When the school bus left Millfield on that spring morning, 53 children expected to return by evening. Instead, we disappeared into a shadow world of forced labor and exploitation. This is the story of how we survived, how we resisted, and how we found our way home. More importantly, it's about what we learned along the way, about human cruelty and resilience, about systems that fail and people who don't, about finding strength in the darkest circumstances and building family from shared struggle. Emma, this is powerful, Marion said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm writing it for us, the 53, Emma explained. So we have a record of what happened, in our own words, but also for the others, the ones still missing, the ones who haven't been found yet. Marion closed the laptop gently and took her daughter's hands. You know, when I started searching for you, I never imagined how it would change both our lives. I was just a mother looking for her child. And now you're leading international policy reform, Emma said with pride. And you're advising the United Nations, Marion countered. They sat in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, the desperate search, the dangerous investigation, the miraculous reunion, and the purposeful rebuilding that followed. Outside their hotel window, London glittered with evening lights. Somewhere in the city, the final proceedings against Cartwright and his associates were being prepared, with testimony from dozens of survivors ensuring maximum sentences. In Moldova, the compound where Emma and the others had been held was being transformed into a rehabilitation center for trafficking victims. In Millfield, a memorial garden had been planted at the school, with 53 trees representing each child taken and returned. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they hadn't taken that bus? Emma asked softly. If we'd just gone to a Real textile museum that day? Marion considered this. I try not to dwell on alternate histories, but I know this much. You were extraordinary before they took you, and you're extraordinary now. Different, certainly, marked by what happened, but also stronger in ways I couldn't have imagined. Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder, allowing herself to feel the weight of the past and the promise of the future simultaneously. "We should get some rest," Marian suggested. "Tomorrow's panel discussion starts early." As they prepared for bed, Emma paused at the window, looking out at the city lights. For years of captivity had taught her to appreciate freedom in all its forms, the freedom to choose her clothing, her food, her activities, the freedom to speak without fear, the freedom to plan for a future beyond the next shift in the factory. Now, she was using that freedom to ensure others would never experience what she and her classmates had endured. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself before boarding that school bus, but it was the life she had forged from the aftermath, a purposeful, connected, and increasingly hopeful. Marian watched her daughter silently, struck by the poised young woman Emma had become despite, or perhaps because of, the ordeal she had survived. The search that had consumed for years of Marian's life had ended, but the journey it had set them on was just beginning. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythms, indifferent to the small victories and personal transformations happening within its boundaries. But in hotel rooms and conference halls throughout London, the ripples of one mother's refusal to give up were spreading outward, changing policies, practices, and possibilities for children across the world. Emma turned from the window, meeting her mother's gaze with a smile of quiet understanding. They had both been irrevocably changed by the years of separation, but the bond between them had emerged stronger, tested by tragedy, tempered by perseverance, and ultimately triumphant. "Ready for tomorrow?" Marian asked. Emma nodded. "I am," she said simply, and in those two words was the culmination of their shared journey, from loss to search to rescue to renewal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to transform their experience into meaningful change. But tonight, they were simply mother and daughter, survivors together, rebuilding their lives one day at a time. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. It truly means a lot. If this story gave you chills or made you think, hit the like button, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries like this. And tell me in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? I'd love to hear what you think. See you in the next one.